Hello students, I'm Dr. Madhu Chaudhary and I'll be your mentor for hematology sections in Pathology DigiNerve. Let's begin this session on a quick recap of anemias. Please remember, hematology as such is very important from your NEET perspective. You'll surely get 5 to 6 questions of hematology, and out of those, 2 to 3 questions will be from anemias. Please remember, anemia is a very simple topic to understand. You just need to understand and clear the concepts of each and pathology of each and every anemia, and then it will be very simple to answer all the questions. So let's begin. We will first cover the basics of anemia and then go on to the types of various anemias. Beginning with the basics, the definition. What is the definition of anemia? How do you label a person anemic or not? Anemia basically is reduction in the total circulating red cell mass below the normal limits. Two important points to remember is reduction and red cell mass that is below the normal limits. We also know that calculating red cell mass is not routine. Okay, we do not routinely calculate the red cell mass. So how do we determine if the patient is anemic or not? We determine with the help of hemoglobin and the hematocrit. These are the various reference values of hemoglobin and hematocrit at various age and for various genders. All right. So at birth, the hemoglobin is more, and with increasing age, the hemoglobin decreases. All right. And one catch here is we can calculate hematocrit by multiplying hemoglobin into 3. All right. Coming to the morphology of red blood cells. Okay, in morphology, we have to determine the size, shape, and the color. Please remember, for the size, we use the word cytic, and for the color, we use the word chromic. All right, size is cytic and color is chromic. First of all, coming to the size of the RBC. The normal RBC size varies from 6 to 8 micron. This is the normal size. Size less than 6 micron, we label the cells as microcytic cells. And more than 9 micron, we label the RBCs as macrocytic. This we all know, all right? So how do we determine the size? How do we determine whether the RBCs are small or big? Based on the peripheral blood smear. Yes, if we look in the peripheral blood smear, we will have to see the size of a normal small lymphocyte. Size of a normal RBC is comparable to that of a small lymphocyte. So if this is a small lymphocyte, the cells comparable to this size, this RBC is comparable to this size, are normal in size. All right. So we determine the size of a red blood cell based on the size of a small lymphocyte. Okay. Coming to the shape of the RBC. What is the normal shape of the RBC? The normal shape of the RBC, we call it as discoid, biconcave, or dumbbell shaped. All right. So it's a discoid, biconcave, or dumbbell shaped red blood cell. So we studied the structural proteins in our regular classes. Which protein is responsible for the shape of the RBC? It is spectrin. Please remember SS. Spectrin protein is responsible for the normal shape of the RBC. All right. See, this is a normal RBC. It's a dumbbell shaped or biconcave disc. On a 3D view, you will see like this. All right. Coming to the color. Color, we said the word we use for color is chromic. Because of this biconcave shape, the stains are taken up predominantly at the periphery. All right. So if you see in a peripheral blood smear, the red cell will appear like this. The periphery would be stained and the central portion would be pale. This is called central pallor. Now you will ask me whether the central pallor is normal or not. Yes, central pallor is normal if it is 1/3 the diameter of the RBC. If the central pallor is covering 1/3 of the diameter of the RBC, it is considered as normal. However, if it is more than half of the diameter of the RBC, we call these cells as hypochromic. Alright, I said central pallor is normal. However, if it is more than half of the diameter of the RBC, we call those cells as hypochromic. Coming to the important indices. Alright, so there are various red cell indices. We all know MCV, MCH, MCHC. Please remember these indices are very important. Your examiners love to ask the questions based on their values. Alright, so please don't worry about the formulas of these red cell indices. Their values are more important. However, we'll just briefly cover the formulas also. So MCV is basically PCV into percentage upon RBC count into 10. The normal value is 80 to 90 femtoliter. MCH is hemoglobin divided by RBC into 10. This is usually 27 to 33 picograms. MCHC is calculated as hemoglobin divided by PCV. This is usually 33 to 37 gram per deciliter. So you need not learn about these formulas, but their values are definitely important. You just need to have an average idea of the values. Alright. So please also remember MCH is the least useful indicator. Alright, MCH is your least useful indicator, and marked alterations in all these three, MCV, MCH and MCHC, is definitely very important in iron deficiency anemia or anemias due to maturation defects. Alright. So coming to the reticulocyte counts. What are reticulocytes? Reticulocytes are basically late orthochromatic erythroblasts. Alright, late orthochromatic reticuloblasts. Basically, these are newly released RBCs. Newly released RBCs, they are non-nucleated. Please remember, they are non-nucleated, but they have free ribosomal RNAs. Free ribosomal RNAs. Now, these free ribosomal RNAs take up stains and they are stained as blue-black punctate spots. Alright, they are stained as blue-black punctate spots. So, an important question, what stains are used for reticulocyte count? Yes, these are supravital stains. Alright, supravital stains are used to stain reticulocytes and they appear as blue-black punctate spots. So, if you see here, the blue-black punctate spots like this, they are reticulocytes. Alright. So, normal reticulocyte is around 1.5% in adults, varying from 0.5 to 2%. Alright. Normal reticulocyte count varies from 0.5 to 2% in adults. So, I just mentioned supravital stains are used for staining of reticulocyte counts. What supravital stains can be used? Yes, they are methylene blue or brilliant cressyl blue. These are supravital stains used for staining of reticulocyte count and other cells also. So, you should also be knowing what is a corrected reticulocyte count. Corrected reticulocyte count is basically reticulocyte corrected based on the patient's hematocrit. How do we calculate it? Now, the corrected reticulocyte count is simply reticulocyte count into hemoglobin of your patient divided by hemoglobin of a normal person. So, if they ask you a question, you are given reticulocyte count as 4, and hemoglobin as 6. So what would be the corrected reticulocyte count? Simple mathematics, 4 into 6 divided by, on an average, if you take patient's normal hemoglobin as 15, so it will be somewhere close to 1.8. All right, 1.8 would be your corrected reticulocyte count. Please remember that this corrected reticulocyte count reflects the bone marrow's activity. So it's also known as poor man's bone marrow index. Poor man's bone marrow index. An important question, what is corrected reticulocyte, also known as poor man's bone marrow index? Please remember, normally corrected reticulocyte count is around 1 to 3%. An accurate reticulocyte count is a key to the classification of anemias. We will study this later. So we've studied the morphology, we've studied the indices. Let us study brief about the stains and various biopsy needles. So just now I told you what supravital stains are. They help in staining of reticulocytes. So what are these supravital stains? They are neomethylene blue, brilliant crescile blue, crystal violet and methyl violet. Now you will ask me, what do these stains stain? They stain reticulocytes, Heinz bodies and free ribosomal RNA. Alright, these various bodies are stained by supravital stain. Sometime back a question was asked, supravital stains stain all except, so these were the option, plus there was copper in the options. So what all do supravital stains stain? They stain reticulocyte count, reticulocytes, Heinz bodies, free ribosomal RNA, but they do not stain copper. Alright, so RDW. What is RDW? RDW is basically red cell distribution width. RDW or red cell distribution width. This is calculated based on the variation in the size. Variation in the size or variation in the MCV, because MCV determines the size of the RBCs. This basically helps in differential diagnosis of various anemias. All right. So RDW helps in the differential diagnosis of various anemias. Please remember that raised RDW is a known cause of mortality in patients, the reasons being unexplained. All right. One important thing I forgot, RDW is most important in the differentiation of iron deficiency anemia and thalassemia. All right, we will study this later on. Although we discussed the biopsy needles, the aspiration needles in our regular classes, but I just thought I'll briefly mention here because sometime back a question was asked, you were given an image and were asked to identify the needle. So we have bone marrow aspiration needles, bone marrow biopsy needles. We all know bone marrow aspiration needles are Klima needle and Sala needle, and this is the bone marrow biopsy needle or the Jamshidi needle. All right. So how will you identify whether this is Klima or Sala needle? Very important. You see the position of the screw. This is the screw. This is longitudinal in Klima and this is at the side in Sala needle. All right. So L long in Klima and side in Sala needle. All right. So based on the position of the screw, you can identify whether it is Klima needle or Sala needle. Jamshidi needle, simple, it is a T-shaped needle. While discussing these needles, just have a brief idea what is the site of aspiration in bone marrow aspiration. It is sternum and posterior iliac crest. Then site for bone marrow biopsy, Yes, it is posterior iliac crest. All right. So let's begin the most important aspect of anemias, the classification. Now your classification can be based on mechanism, morphology and the physiology of anemia. So the anemias can be classified based on the mechanism causing anemias, morphology of anemia and the physiological classification. So now coming to the mechanism of causing anemia. Anemia can be caused because of blood loss, decreased RBC production or increased RBC destruction. All right. So blood loss, simple, could be acute or chronic. Decreased RBC production could be nutritional deficiency or maturation defect. Increased RBC destruction could be due to hemorrhage or hemolysis, which in turn could be extravascular based on the site of hemolysis, or it could be intravascular. All right. So this was based on the mechanism causing anemias. Now coming to the morphology of anemias. This could be due to normocytic, normochromic anemia, microcytic, hypochromic anemias, or macrocytic, normocytic anemia, normochromic anemias. All right. So we can classify based on the morphology. Coming to the physiology. Here we will, the most important factor determining the physiological classification is the retic count. If the retic count is less than 2.5, you check for the RBC morphology. RBC morphology could be either normocytic, normochromic or microcytic, macrochromic. The normocytic, normochromic anemias are basically all the hypoproliferative anemias. Hypoproliferative anemias are the most important anemias. They are around 75% of the cases of anemias are hypoproliferative. These anemias are characterized by absolute or relative failure of the marrow in the erythroid lineage. All right. So the other one, micro or macrocytic anemias, are basically caused due to maturation defect. All right. So this was reticulocyte count less than 2.5. Reticulocyte count more than 2.5, that means hemorrhage or hemolysis is occurring. That is why there is compensatory erythropoiesis, there is reticulocytosis. All right. So reticulocyte count is increased. Now coming to the various types of anemias. All right. So we will classify our anemias as microcytic hypochromic, macrocytic or megaloblastic, and hemolytic anemias. So let's start with microcytic hypochromic anemia. Please remember, this is one of the favorite topic of your examiners, and please be assured एक question तो आएगा ही आएगा from microcytic hypochromic anemias. We all know what are the microcytic hypochromic anemias. We know the traditional mnemonic for this, SITA. All right. Please remember SITA for your microcytic hypochromic anemias. Sideroblastic anemias, iron deficiency anemia, thalassemia, and anemia of chronic disease. All right. So please remember the mnemonic SITA of microcytic hypochromic anemias. Another could be tics. All right. Thalassemia, iron deficiency anemia, anemia of chronic disease, and sideroblastic anemia. Whichever you feel comfortable, you can remember SITA or tics. All right. So we will discuss Iron deficiency, sideroblastic and chronic disease anemia here. Thalassemia, we will discuss it with the hemoglobinopathies. All right. Beginning with iron deficiency anemia. Please remember, iron deficiency anemia is the most common anemia for any age group. They can ask you a question. A 60-year-old patient presents with hemoglobin 6. What would be the most common anemia? It will be iron deficiency anemia. Please don't label that patient as anemia of chronic disease, considering it's an old patient, he might be having some chronic disease. No. Unless and until it's specified, every deficiency anemia would be iron deficiency anemia. Alright, they can also ask you, a 20-year-old female presents with easy fatigability, hemoglobin of 6. What will you see in her peripheral blood smear? Yes, you will see microcytic hypochromic anemia, because the most likely cause is iron deficiency anemia. Two important things to remember in iron deficiency anemia: its metabolism and the lab values, the red cell indices. So beginning with the metabolism, beginning with iron metabolism. The source of iron, two sources: food of animal origin and food of plant origin. All right. Food of animal origin is in the ferrous form, and that in the plant is in the ferric form. Please remember this. All right. So what is the site of absorption? A routinely asked question, site of absorption of iron is duodenum and proximal jejunum. So site of iron absorption is duodenum and proximal jejunum. If I ask you what is the site of absorption of vitamin B12, it will be terminal ileum. Please remember this. You need to know a site of absorption of iron, duodenum and proximal jejunum, vitamin B12, terminal ileum, folate is jejunum. All right. So now let us see iron absorption. This is a duodenal enterocyte, this being the apical site and this being the basolateral site. We know that iron is present in the ferric form in food, usually from the plant origin. This ferric form has to be converted to ferrous form to be absorbed into the cell. Now this ferric form will be converted into ferrous form with the help of an enzyme called cytochrome B reductase. All right. Now this iron is ready to be absorbed. This iron is ready to be absorbed. This has to go inside the duodenal enterocyte. This will be done with the help of a protein called DMT1. This protein present on the apical side of the duodenal enterocyte will help in the absorption of iron into the cell. This protein is called DMT1. All right. What is DMT1? Divalent metal transporter. So because of this DMT1, the ferric form had to be converted to ferrous form, because as the name suggests, divalent. It can take up ions only which are valency 2. Along with the iron, this DMT1 also takes up manganese, copper with valency 2. Now, this iron is there in the cell. It has to be transported out of the cell so that it can be circulated in the blood. Now, how will this go? Will it go on its own? No, you need another protein for this, which is present on the basolateral membrane of the duodenal cell. This is known as ferroportin. All right. As the name suggests, ferroportin. This basically ports the ferrous, the iron, into the blood. So this now again has to be converted into ferric form. This again has to be converted in the ferric form so that it can be circulated in the blood. So basically this ferric to ferrous, ferrous to ferrous outside the cell and again back to ferrous was only because of this DMT1. This takes only the divalent metals. Alright. So this ferric to ferrous will again be converted by hephacetin or ceruloplasmin. Alright. Hephacetin or ceruloplasmin enzyme helps in the conversion of ferrous to ferric. Now this ferric iron is ready for circulation. Will it circulate on its own? No, you need another protein, basically a carrier protein, which will carry it into the circulation. This protein is known as transferrin. Alright. So ferric iron in combination with transferrin will be circulated into the blood. It will go to the bone marrow for production of hemoglobin, and the extra iron will go to the liver and will be stored as hemosiderin. Alright. So ferric from the food will be converted to ferrous by cytochrome B reductase. Why? Because this ferrous iron has to be absorbed into the duodenal enterocyte, which is absorbed only in divalent form with the help of DMT1, divalent metal transporter 1. Alright. So this iron is again now taken out of the cell into the circulation with the help of ferroportin. Ferroportin helps in transport of iron into the blood. For this, ferrous again has to be converted to ferric. This is done with the help of hephacetin or ceruloplasmin. Now this ferric is ready for circulation. Along with the transferrin, it is circulated in the blood and it reaches the bone marrow and the liver. Alright. So this is all about iron metabolism. So coming to what is the transport form? We just now studied what is the transport form or the carrier protein with which iron is carried in the blood. It is transferrin. Alright, transferrin. Normal transferrin saturation is 33%. The storage form is hemosiderin. Where is hemosiderin stored? Hemosiderin in the liver, and ferritin. Ferritin in the duodenal enterocyte. So here if this iron is not absorbed, it will not taken off the cell, it will be stored in the duodenal enterocyte as ferritin. Now what is the central or master regulator of iron hemostasis? An important question. The central or the master regulator is a protein called hepcidin. Alright, hepcidin. Hepcidin, important question. Where is this protein secreted from? Hepcidin, as the name suggests, secreted from liver. Where does this act? This protein acts on the protein ferroportin. So, let's again go back to the iron metabolism. Now, this is ferroportin. Hepcidin basically acts here on ferroportin. Hepcidin acts here on ferroportin so that iron is not absorbed into the circulation. Alright, this prevents iron absorption into the circulation. So that's the role of hepcidin. Coming to the peripheral blood finding, you will see various microcytic hypochromic cells. Alright, microcytic hypochromic cell with increased central pallor, that is hypochromic cell. So you will see microcytic hypochromic cells. Alright, you can also see some pencil cells. Alright, so hemoglobin, it will be decreased. MCV, decreased or increased? It will be decreased. Why? Because the cells are smaller in size. MCH, decreased. MCHC, it will be decreased. Coming to the iron study, serum iron, it is deficient, so it will be decreased. Ferritin, no iron, so no storage, decreased. Transferrin, again decreased. Why? Because there is no iron, so there is no protein to circulate it. Total iron binding capacity, because iron is decreased, so it's the cell's binding capacity it will be raised. All right. So these are the lab values of iron deficiency anemia. Iron decreased, ferritin decreased, transferrin decreased, all three decreased, but TIBC increased. Coming to the bone marrow will be hypercellular with Me ratio increased because there is more erythropoiesis. All right. But if you see iron, stored iron in the marrow, what will happen to this? It will be decreased. Now, how do you determine the marrow iron? Yes, the stain used is Prussian blue stain. So, coming to the next microcytic hypochromic anemia, that is the sideroblastic anemia. Sideroblastic anemia, as the name suggests, sidero means iron, blastic means erythroid precursors. All right. So, what will you see here? Iron in the erythroid precursors. So, please remember, as such, there is no iron deficiency. No iron deficiency in sideroblastic anemia. As we saw in iron deficiency anemia, iron is normal. But the only problem is hemoglobin is not synthesized here. Why is hemoglobin not synthesized? If you remember from your biochemistry classes, heme synthesis requires an enzyme, that is ALA synthetase. All right. So, this enzyme is deficient here. That is why heme is not synthesized. Iron ka no problem. Iron will be there. There will be normal iron absorption. So, here the causes are basically hereditary or acquired. Hereditary, you will see deficiency of ALA synthetase. Acquired could be some drugs, alcohol, vitamin B6 deficiency, or lead poisoning. All right. So, these are the various causes for sideroblastic anemia. I just mentioned lead poisoning. Another important question. What kind of anemia will you see in lead poisoning? You will see sideroblastic anemia, that is microcytic hypochromic anemia. All right. So, please remember, there is no problem in the iron metabolism, no deficiency of iron, only the heme cannot be synthesized. That is because of ALA synthetase. All right. Please remember the pathology of each and every anemia. It is very important. So, what happens? As I already told you, there is no iron deficiency. In fact, iron is excess. Iron is excess. What will you see? You will see iron granules in the blasts. All right. How do you stain the iron? I already told you, iron will be stained with Prussian blue and Romanowsky stains, and these will be stained as Pappenheimer bodies. Please remember, these will be stained as Pappenheimer bodies. So, if you see in the peripheral blood, these are siderocytes. All right, siderocytes. A red blood cell, you will see iron granules. All right. Normally, they are not present, but you can usually see them post splenectomy, but not in normal persons. All right. In the bone marrow, you will see sideroblast. See, these are sideroblast. If you see, this is an erythroblast, nucleated erythroblast. You will see iron granules like this. How will you label it as? Ringed sideroblast. Please remember, more than 5 granules, okay, more than 5 granules or iron granules covering more than 1/3, more than or equal to 1/3 of nuclear circumference, or more than or equal to 5 granules is enough to label them as ringed sideroblasts. Alright. So, ringed sideroblastic anemia, hemoglobin, it will be decreased. MCV, it will be decreased. MCH and MCHC will also be decreased. RDW will be increased. Alright. But here what will you see in the iron studies? Is iron deficient? No. So, the serum iron will be raised. Serum ferritin will also be raised. Transferrin will be raised, but total iron binding capacity would be reduced. Okay, so there is no iron deficiency ka problem. So, iron, ferritin, transferrin would be raised, but then there is excess of iron, so the binding capacity would decrease. Alright, so this was sideroblastic anemia. Now, coming to a third microcytic hypochromic anemia, anemia of chronic diseases. Alright, anemia of chronic diseases is basically anemia seen in patients with chronic infections or inflammations, renal disease, hypometabolic states. So, what exactly is the pathology in these chronic diseases? In these chronic diseases, because of chronic inflammation, there is increased interleukin 6. Now, this increased interleukin 6 goes to the liver and results in increased production of hepcidin. Alright, what did we study earlier in iron metabolism? What does hepcidin do? It prevents the iron absorption from the duodenal enterocyte. Please remember, this hepcidin is an acute phase reactant. Alright, acute phase reactant, and it acts on, where did hepcidin act? Hepcidin acts on ferroportin to prevent iron absorption. Alright, I hope you remember the diagram of iron metabolism. Hepcidin acts on hepcidin, or the central or the master regulator of iron hemostasis. It acts on ferroportin and it prevents iron absorption. Alright, so moving forward, hemoglobin, what will happen to the hemoglobin? It will be less. MCV, it will be less. MCH will be less. MCHC, normal or slightly reduced. Iron study, iron, will iron be low or more? Yes, iron will be low. Why? Because it was not absorbed. Its absorption was prevented by hepcidin. So, iron will be low, but ferritin will be raised. Yeah, so because iron is not moving out of the duodenal enterocyte, its level will increase in the duodenal enterocyte. It will be stored as ferritin. What will happen to transferrin? Since there is no iron available for circulation, so transferrin will be reduced. Total iron binding capacity? Iron binding capacity will also be reduced because because the cells do not want iron. There is already enough iron in the cells, but the cells do not want. So, total iron binding capacity was raised in iron deficiency anemia, but lowered in anemia of chronic disease. How will you remember this? Please remember this mnemonic TIBC for total iron binding capacity. In iron deficiency anemia, it was on the top or increased, and in anemia of chronic disease, it was below or low. So, TIBC is raised in iron deficiency. TIBC is reduced in anemia of chronic disease. Alright, I hope you will remember this. So, what will happen to the various iron parameters in all the three microcytic hypochromic anemias? So, iron deficiency anemia, beginning with iron deficiency anemia, let us quickly revise together. Iron deficiency anemia, iron would be decreased, ferritin would be decreased, transferrin would be decreased, TIBC would be raised. Coming to sideroblastic anemia. Sideroblastic anemia, what will happen to iron, whether it will be low or high? It will be increased, because as such there was no deficiency of iron, no problem with iron metabolism. Iron would be increased, ferritin again would be increased, ferrin would be increased, and TIBC would be reduced. So here all first three are decreased, TIBC raised. Here all first three are raised, TIBC reduced. Anemia of chronic disease. Anemia of chronic disease, what will happen to iron? Iron will be reduced. Why? Because hepcidin prevents iron absorption. There would be no iron in the circulation, reduced iron in the circulation. So iron would be less, ferritin would be more, transferrin would be less. What will happen to TIBC? TIBC will also be less. Okay, please remember the mnemonic: total iron binding capacity, TIBC for total iron binding capacity. In iron deficiency, TIBC would be raised, and in anemia of chronic disease, TIBC would be below or low. So this is your one-stop slide for revision of all the three microcytic hypochromic anemias. Alright, so coming to the important macrocytic or megaloblastic anemias. Alright, what are basically macrocytic megaloblastic anemias? These anemias are associated with a macrocytic blood picture or megaloblastic erythropoiesis in your bone marrow. So why there is megaloblastic blood picture? Because there is asynchrony between the nuclear and cytoplasmic maturation. Alright, there is asynchrony between the nucleus and cytoplasmic maturation. The nucleus maturation is defective or delayed, and the cytoplasmic maturation takes at its own pace. So this explains the development of megaloblasts or macrocytes. So now coming to what is exactly the problem, why does this megaloblastic anemia, what is the cause of megaloblastic anemia? It is due to nutritional deficiency of vitamin B12, folate deficiency, or deficiency of intrinsic factor. Alright. Deficiency of intrinsic factor. Alright. What is intrinsic factor? Another name for intrinsic factor? Yes, Castle factor. Alright. Intrinsic factor basically helps in the absorption of vitamin B12. It acts as a cell-directed carrier protein, just like you had transferrin in the iron absorption, you have intrinsic factor in the vitamin B12 absorption. It helps in the absorption of vitamin B12. Alright. So, let us quickly revise the metabolism of vitamin B12 and folate. Vitamin B12. Another name for vitamin B12? Yes, it is cobalamin. Site of absorption, I've already told you, site of absorption, terminal ileum. What was the site of absorption for iron? Very quickly, yes, duodenum and proximal jejunum. So, source, food of animal origin. I told you already, intrinsic factor is responsible for the absorption, is helpful in the absorption of iron. Intrinsic factor secreted from, yes, parietal cells of the stomach. Coming to folate metabolism. Source of folate, it is food of plant origin. Site of absorption, we've already done this, jejunum. So, I will again emphasize site of absorption of vitamin B12, terminal ileum, site of absorption for folate, jejunum, Site of absorption for iron was duodenum and proximal jejunum. Alright. So, we also come across the term pernicious anemia. Pernicious anemia is nothing. It is also megaloblastic anemia, but it is specifically due to deficiency of intrinsic factor. Vitamin B12 as there is no nutritional deficiency, but just because of the defect in intrinsic factor, deficiency of intrinsic factor, vitamin B12 is not absorbed. The cause is probably due to atrophy of gastric mucosa. See, I already told you the gastric parietal cells secrete intrinsic factors. So, the atrophy of this gastric mucosa causes deficiency of intrinsic factor. This could be of immune pathology. And the treatment here is vitamin B12 supplementation plus steroids. Why? Because it could be of immune pathology. Alright, so let's see how this vitamin B12 and folate deficiency causes megaloblastic anemia. I hope you all remember from your biochemistry classes that vitamin B12 is necessary for these pathways, for the production of succinyl-CoA and for the production of methionine. Now, if your vitamin B12 is not there, what will happen? Succinyl-CoA will not be formed, but in turn the raised level of methyl-malonyl-CoA and propenyl-CoA, raised level of methyl-malonyl-CoA and propenyl-CoA, this will lead to synthesis of certain fatty acids which will result in degeneration of neuronal lipids, and this would result in neurological manifestation as subacute combined degeneration. What is it? Subacute combined degeneration. Okay, why is it combined? Combined because it affects the peripheral nerves, the sensory nerves, the cerebellum, the spinal cord. So that is why it is combined. Please remember that this feature is only because of deficiency of vitamin B12, not because of folate deficiency. Also, please remember, since methionine is not formed, so increased level of homocysteine or hyperhomocystinemia is a risk factor for atherosclerosis. Alright, hyperhomocystinemia is a risk factor for atherosclerosis. Okay, so what about folate deficiency? We know that methyl tetrahydrofolate is required for the production of DNA. So if this is not there, this explains there is defective and delayed nuclear maturation. Alright. First slide I told you about macrocytic anemia is because of defective and delayed nuclear maturation. This explains why we get megaloblasts. Alright. So coming to the blood picture, what will you see? You will see macrocytes. Alright. You will see macrocytes. There would be marked anisopoikilocytosis. What do you mean by the term marked anisopoikilocytosis? Anisocytosis means variation in size. Poikilocytosis means variation in shape. Alright. So also you will see Howell-Jolly bodies and nuclear DNA remnants. Alright. This is also seen post splenectomy, not in normal. Plus you will also see neutropenia, thrombocytopenia. But what is the characteristic of megaloblastic anemia? Yes, it is hypersegmented neutrophil. This is the characteristic, hypersegmented neutrophil. See, neutrophil has usually 2 to 3 lobes. Here you will see multiple lobes, hypersegmented. When will you call it as hypersegmented? When you will see more than 5% of hypersegmented neutrophils in the blood picture, or even one neutrophil with 6 or more lobes is sufficient to call it hypersegmented neutrophil. Alright, more than 5% of hypersegmented neutrophils in a blood picture, or even one neutrophil with 6 or more lobes, it's sufficient to call it hypersegmented neutrophils, right? So bone marrow, again it will be hypercellular. Myeloid to erythroid ratio would be decreased. Why? Because there would be erythropoiesis, and then you will see erythroblasts as megaloblasts. Okay. Now your MCV would be markedly raised. MCH could be normal. MCHC could be normal or slightly reduced. What will happen to your RDW? RDW, what was it? Red cell distribution width. It will be raised. Why? Because there is variation in the size. Coming to the biochemical test. Simple, vitamin B12 reduced, folate reduced, methylmalonyl, it will be raised. Hyperhomocystinemia, homocysteine would be raised. Why would bilirubin and LDH raised? Anybody? Why would bilirubin and LDH raised? Why? Because there is defective erythropoiesis, so there would be accelerated destruction of these cells also. So bilirubin and LDH would be raised. So we also need to know about the Schilling test and Figlu test in megaloblastic anemia. Schilling test, please remember, this is not a diagnostic test, and it is not done these days also. Okay, it is not a diagnostic test. It basically helps to know the etiology, whether it is due to vitamin B12 deficiency, whether it is due to folate deficiency, whether it is due to intrinsic factor, or whether any infectious causes. All right, infectious causes that can cause malabsorption and in turn B12 or folate deficiency. All right, coming to Figlu test. Figlu, what is Figlu? It is 4-amino glutamic acid. All right, why is this necessary? So this folate is necessary for conversion of 4-amino glutamic acid or Figlu into glutamate. So if this folate is not present, it is deficient, this gets detected in urine. So this is about Figlu test. All right. So I just told you in Schilling's test that it is also helpful to determine the etiology as infections in megaloblastic anemia. Can you name one infection that can cause megaloblastic anemia? This infection is fish tapeworm infection. All right. So fish tapeworm infection is also associated with megaloblastic anemia. Another name for fish tapeworm is Diphyllobuthrium latum. All right. So just now we studied that vitamin B12 and folate deficiency causes macrocytic anemia. Can you name other disorders that can also cause macrocytic anemia? Please remember A, B, C, D, E, F. Please remember this mnemonic for macrocytic anemia. A comes for alcohol plus any liver disease. B, we already studied, vitamin B12 deficiency. C is because of compensatory reticulocytosis. D is for certain drugs. E is endocrine. Specific disease causing is hypothyroidism. F is, yes, folate deficiency. So A, B, C, D, E, F are other disorders that can cause macrocytic anemias. So we studied the microcytic hypochromic, the macrocytic or the megaloblastic anemia. Now it's the turn for hemolytic anemias. Hemolytic anemias basically result from the increased destruction of red cells. Alright, increased destruction of RBCs. So based on the site of RBC destruction, it could be extravascular hemolysis or intravascular hemolysis. But primarily we classify them as primary hemolytic anemias or acquired hemolytic anemias. Alright, primary or the hereditary hemolytic anemias, acquired hemolytic anemias. So coming to the hereditary hemolytic anemias, these could be due to defects in the cell membrane or defects within the cell. Alright, defects in the cell membrane could be hereditary spherocytosis, hereditary elliptocytosis, or hereditary stomatocytosis. Defects within the cell could be due to enzymopathies or could be hemoglobinopathies. Okay, enzymopathies, we will study the G6PD deficiency and pyruvate kinase deficiency. Hemoglobinopathies like sickle cell anemia or thalassemia. So, hereditary spherocytosis is the most common hereditary hemolytic anemia. Alright, basically these anemias are characterized by spherocytes in the blood picture. We all know this is the normal shape of the RBC. This becomes like a sphere. Alright, so what actually is the pathology here? We have studied the various structural proteins in the regular classes. So the most important protein responsible for the shape of the RBC, what was it? Shape S protein, spectrin, SS. Please remember that. Okay. So here in hereditary spherocytosis, the most common defect is the mutation in ankyrin. Okay. Most common defect is mutation in ankyrin. And this is an autosomal dominant defect. Few patients have also defect in spectrin, mutation in spectrin. Please remember this is an autosomal recessive disorder, and autosomal dominant is much more common than autosomal recessive disorders. Okay, it is seen in around 75% of patients. So here the most common defect is mutation in ankyrin. Most serious defect would be spectrin mutation. Why? Because this is autosomal recessive. So the most common protein, most common structural protein in the red cell membrane is glycophorin. Most common structural protein in the red cell membrane is glycophorin, but you will never see a defect in glycophorin in hereditary spherocytosis. Alright. Please remember, hereditary spherocytosis is an example of extravascular hemolysis. The hemolysis is occurring outside the blood vessels. Where exactly hemolysis occurs? It occurs in splenomegaly. So this explains, since it is extravascular, so patients will suffer from splenomegaly, anemia, very obvious, jaundice, pigment gallstones. Splenomegaly, jaundice, pigment gallstones is a characteristic triad found in hereditary spherocytosis. Also, this jaundice is unconjugated hyperbilirubinemia. Okay. This jaundice is also known as congenital hemolytic jaundice. You can also see aplastic crisis, not usually, but predisposed with parvovirus infection, parvovirus B infection. All right. Parvovirus B infection can cause aplastic crisis. So, the treatment, what is the culprit here? The spleen, because there is extravascular hemolysis. So, the treatment would be splenectomy. All right. So, coming to the peripheral blood picture, you will see spherocytes. What are spherocytes? Spherocytes are basically small dark staining cell. Small dark staining cells without any central pallor. Why would there be no central pallor? We studied that the shape of the cell, the discoid shape of the cell is responsible for its central pallor. Alright, the stain was taken up by the periphery, that is why the central wall was pale. Now that shape has been lost, it has become into spherocytes. So, there would be no central pallor. Alright, moreover, the cells have lost water and they have become concentrated. That is why central pallor has been lost. So, here the MCV, what will happen to MCV? It will be decreased. Why? Because there are small spherocytes. MCHC would be increased. Why? Because the cells have lost water and they have become concentrated. Reticulocyte count will be increased. RDW will be increased. The most important test in hereditary spherocytosis is the osmotic fragility test. Alright, osmotic fragility test. Please remember the osmotic fragility test, they basically determine the red cell lysis. Alright, if this is a normal graph. If you see normally, the red cell lysis starts at 0.5% in a salt solution and it is complete by around 0.3%. What happens in hereditary spherocytosis? The cells have become very fragile, they are very weak. So, there is a shift to the right. The curve shifts to the right. The hemolysis occurs more quickly. Alright, because the cells are very weak. We will study this later on that in thalassemia, there is a shift to the left. Alright, so the confirmatory test here is EMA test. What is EMA? Eosin 5 malamite test. Alright, this is the confirmatory test for hereditary spherocytosis. Now, coming to where all the spherocytes can be seen. Hereditary spherocytes, we just now studied. Spherocytes can also be seen in autoimmune hemolytic anemia, ABO hemolytic disease of the newborn, hypersplenism, blood transfusion and burns. These are the various disorders where spherocytes can be seen. Please remember, in autoimmune hemolytic anemia is the most common cause for spherocytosis. This is the most common cause for spherocytosis. How will you differentiate hereditary spherocytosis from autoimmune hemolytic anemia? Yes, you will do a direct Coombs test. Direct Coombs test would be positive in autoimmune hemolytic anemia and negative in hereditary spherocytosis. Alright. So, we studied the hereditary hemolytic anemias because of the defects in the cell membrane. Now, we will study the hereditary hemolytic anemias because of the defect within the cell. These could be due to the enzymopathies or defects in the enzymes or due to hemoglobinopathies or defects in the hemoglobin. So, coming to enzymopathies. Enzymopathies, which all enzymes can lead to hemolytic anemias? G6PD deficiency or pyruvate kinase deficiency. All right. And hemoglobinopathies could be defect in the quality of the hemoglobin, that is qualitative defects, or because of the quantitative defects. All right. So, hemoglobinopathies could be qualitative defect or quantitative defects. Now, let us see again, going back to your biochemistry classes, where all G6PD enzyme is used. Yes, it's used in HMP shunt pathway or the Embden-Meyerhof pathway. So, your G6PD enzyme is used in HMP shunt pathway and Embden-Meyerhof pathway. So, coming to G6PD deficiency, G6PD gene is located on the X chromosome. Therefore, it's an X-linked recessive disorder. X-linked recessive disorder means, yes, males will be more affected than females, and females would be only asymptomatic or carriers. Please remember, G6PD deficiency, the anemia caused by G6PD deficiency is not a continuous disorder, it's an intermittent disorder. These patients will definitely have shortened RBCs, but there would be no anemia. It's an intermittent disorder and the hemolysis will occur only when there is oxidative stress. Oxidative stress could be due to drugs, metabolic acidosis, certain infections, yes, and very important, an important question, ingestion of flava beans, although uncommon in India, but this can cause oxidative stress and in turn hemolysis in G6PD deficient patients. Can you tell me what all drugs can cause oxidative stress in these patients? Anyone named Sandeep? Yes, Sandeep, please remember, Sandeep can cause oxidative stress and in turn hemolysis in G6PD deficiency patients. Sandeep means sulfonamides, aspirin, NSAIDs, Dapsone, isoniazid and primaquine. So, SANDIP. See what an easy way to remember? Sandeep. Alright. Now, you will ask me, how does this G6PD enzyme deficiency causes hemolysis? So, because of the defect in the HMP pathway, there is failure to form reduced glutathione. Alright. Because of this reduced glutathione, there is oxidation of hemoglobin, and this oxidation of hemoglobin is seen as Heinz bodies. Alright, this oxidation of hemoglobin is seen as Heinz bodies. Usually you will not see Heinz body 1 to 2 days after hemolysis because these Heinz bodies have been taken up by the spleen, eaten by the spleen. See, these are the Heinz bodies. Alright. We studied earlier the stain used for Heinz body. Very good. Supravital stains. Because of these Heinz body, this anemia, G6PD deficiency anemia, is also known as Heinz bodies hemolytic anemia. Alright. So, this anemia is also known as Heinz bodies hemolytic anemias. I already told you that these Heinz bodies are usually not seen 1 to 2 days after the hemolysis. Why? Because they have been taken off by the spleen, as if they have been bitten off. See? As if they have been bitten off. So, these cells are known as bite cells. Another name for bite cells is degmacytes. An important question. Another name for bite cell, degmacyte. Now, what would be the screening test of G6PD deficiency? This is MRT or methemoglobin test. Another is fluorescent screening test. Also ascorbate cyanide test. Alright, these tests can be used for screening of G6PD deficiency. But what would be the confirmatory test? Confirmatory test would definitely be the enzyme assay. You directly measure the enzyme and you will get to know whether the enzyme is deficient or not. So this was all for G6PD deficiency. Coming to hemoglobinopathies. Hemoglobinopathies, I already told you, could be qualitative defect or quantitative defect. Alright. Coming to the qualitative defect first, that is sickle cell anemia. Here the defect lies in the hemoglobin. Your adult hemoglobin is predominantly replaced by hemoglobin S. Hemoglobin S or sickle hemoglobin. What exactly is the problem here? If you see, this is your beta globin chain. Beta globin chain. So here at the sixth position, your glutamic acid is replaced by valine. Alright. So because of this replacement of glutamic acid by valine, you get sickle hemoglobin. Now how will you remember glutamic replaced by valine or valine replaced by glutamic? Slight confusing now. So you can remember glutamic goes, valine welcomed. Okay. So glutamic goes, valine is welcomed. An easy way to remember. Please remember, these patients with sickle hemoglobin, very important question, they are protected against Plasmodium falciparum. Alright. So these patients have very less chances of getting Plasmodium falciparum. So here, see, glutamic acid is replaced by valine. Now what will happen? These RBCs with deoxygenation, when there is less oxygen, this is reversible, this is irreversible. So with deoxygenation, these cells will lose their biconcave or the discoid shape and will become crescent or elongated. This is crescent shape, okay, crescent or elongated sickle cell. So this is only during deoxygenation. Now these sickle cells have the characteristics, they are very sticky, they stick together and form infarcts which cause vascular occlusion in various organs like lung, heart, eyes, skin, retina, etc. So they form vascular infarcts. So rate of sickling in these patients depends on, yes, definitely the presence of non-sickle hemoglobin, the total hemoglobin concentration and the extent of deoxygenation. Now what will you see in the peripheral blood smear? Peripheral blood smear, you will see moderate to severe anemia plus these crescentic sickle cells. Okay, you can also see Howell-Jolly body. So you will see sickle cells, Howell-Jolly bodies and important target cells. Alright, target cells. So the sickling can also be done with the help of a chemical. An important question, 2% sodium metabisulfite. Adding 2% sodium metabisulfite can result in sickling of these cells. So coming to the hemoglobin electrophoresis graph, what will you find here? You will find that predominantly the adult hemoglobin is replaced by the sickle hemoglobin. That is, hemoglobin A would be markedly reduced, whereas hemoglobin S would be the predominant hemoglobin, around 90%. Plus the fetal hemoglobin, there will be a slight raise, around 20%. Alright. So here you will see sickle hemoglobin here and no adult hemoglobin. But the gold standard test for this is Anybody? Gold standard is HPLC, high performance liquid chromatography. Please remember, electrophoresis is not the gold standard, HPLC is the gold standard. Alright, so how will you determine which hemoglobin appears at which rate, or the odd sequence of appearance of hemoglobin on the electrophoresis chart? I'll tell you a very simple way. From anode, that is positive, to cathode, okay, which all hemoglobin appear and in what sequence? Very easy to remember. A fat Santa Claus arrives. Alright, a fat Santa Claus arrives. Remember this. A means hemoglobin A, starting from cathode. Please remember this, starting from cathode. Hemoglobin A, fat hemoglobin F, that is the fetal hemoglobin, then S for Santa, hemoglobin S or the sickle hemoglobin, then hemoglobin C, and C and A come together, that is hemoglobin A2. Okay, starting one is adult, then fetal, then sickle, then C, and then is A2. A fat Santa Claus arrives. Alright, please remember this is from cathode to anode. Okay, other important things that you see in sickle cell anemia, all important questions. There will be decreased ESR, fish mouth vertebra. Why? Because of occlusion of vertebral arteries. Crew-cut skull. Why? Because of extramedullary hematopoiesis. Where else do you see this? Yes, you see in thalassemia. Extramedullary hematopoiesis or crew-cut skull is also seen in thalassemia. Gamma GANDA bodies. Why? What are these? These are cells trapped in vascular sinusoids of spleen. Okay, these cells are trapped in the sinusoids of spleen. These are known as gamma antibodies. Autosplenectomy. Because of prolonged and repeated infarction, the spleen may itself get removed, or autosplenectomy. However, it is very uncommon in India. Okay, now what is the treatment? Treatment for sickle cell anemia. See, the problem was deoxygenation. Whenever there was deoxygenation, the cells underwent sickling. Now what do? You give drugs which increase the oxygen level. For example, hydroxyurea. So the treatment is hydroxyurea. You give hydroxyurea. Okay, when I started with sickle cell anemia, I told you that sickle cell anemia, these patients are protected against malaria. Which all disorders also you see protection against malaria? Yes, sickle cell anemia, G6PD deficiency, pyroid kinase deficiency, thalassemia, hemoglobin C, and absence of Duffy antigen. In all these disorders, you see that the patients do not get falciparum malaria. Coming to thalassemias, we all know hemoglobin A, alpha 2, beta 2. It has two chains, alpha chain, beta chain. A pair of alpha chain, a pair of beta chain. Now, depending on whether the genetic defect or the deletion lies in alpha chain or beta chain, you can classify it alpha thalassemia or beta thalassemia. Please remember, the alpha gene is located on chromosome 16 and the beta gene is located on chromosome 11. We also use the terms heterozygous and homozygous. Heterozygous means that there is some synthesis of beta chain. So, beta chain is present, some synthesis. Homozygous, there is complete absence of beta chain. No beta chain is synthesized. This is also known as congenital hemolytic anemia. Congenital hemolytic anemia. Please remember, these patients are always transfusion dependent. These patients are always transfusion dependent. Before going to thalassemias, just let us see what are normal hemoglobin made up of. Adult hemoglobin consists of alpha 2, beta 2. The fetal hemoglobin consists of alpha 2 and 2 gamma chains. Hemoglobin A2 consists of alpha 2 and delta 2. Alright. So, hemoglobin A is alpha 2 beta 2, F is alpha 2 gamma 2 and A2 is alpha 2 and delta 2. What is seen at birth? Birth there would be predominantly hemoglobin F, almost 90%. At 1 year, the hemoglobin F reduces to around 1%, and in adults, the fetal hemoglobin is less than 1%. What is the hemoglobin makeup in adults? In adults, it is predominantly the adult hemoglobin, that is hemoglobin A around 95 to 97%, hemoglobin F less than 1%, hemoglobin A2 2.5 to 3.5%. Alright, so this is the normal hemoglobin makeup at birth and in adults. So I told you there would be 4 types of alpha thalassemia. First would be deletion of one gene. These patients would be asymptomatic. Deletion of 2 genes. These patients will have thalassemia trait. Alright, thalassemia trait. 3 gene deletion. This is known as HbH disease. That means there will be no alpha chains. So what will happen? There would be excess of beta chains. HbH disease because of beta 4 tetramers. This is also seen as golf ball inclusions. Alright, golf ball inclusions in the cell. The beta 4 tetramers will be seen. Next, 4 gene deletion, that is no alpha chain. This is known as Bart's disease. Alright, Bart's disease, please remember this is incompatible with life. Incompatible with life. Here you saw beta 4 tetramers in HbH disease. In Bart's disease, you will see alpha 4 tetramers. Okay, alpha 4 tetramers. This is also known as Hydrops fetalis. Why? Because it is incompatible with life. Please remember this is different from your abiohemolytic disease. Or why? Because this is non-immune in nature. Alright. So, this summarizes your all 4 types of alpha thalassemia. So, I told you golf ball inclusions. See, this looks like a golf ball. So, golf ball inclusion seen in HbH disease. An important question, HbH disease. Alright, these are aggregates of beta 4 tetramers. Coming to beta thalassemia, the important one. Another name for beta thalassemia, Mediterranean or Cooley's anemia. Alright, so let's start with the molecular pathogenesis of beta thalassemia. We saw that alpha thalassemia was because of gene deletion. Here in beta thalassemia, there is mutation, there is no deletion. Alright. So, the mutations could be more than 100 mutations have been identified, could be splicing mutation, could be promoter region mutations, could be chain termination mutations. Please remember the splicing mutations are most common. Most common are splicing mutations. So, depending on whether the splicing site is totally degraded or remains intact, you get beta 0 or beta plus, that is no beta gene or some amount of beta chain synthesis. Promoter region mutation, you get some amount of beta chain synthesis. Chain termination mutation, as the name suggests, there will be termination of beta chains. So, beta 0. I just mentioned mutations are the most important defects in beta thalassemia. You also see gene deletion very rarely, and you see gene deletion in case of hereditary persistence of fetal hemoglobin, HPFH, alright, HPFH, hereditary persistence of fetal hemoglobin. What is this? Beta thalassemia resulting from gene deletion. Primarily it is mutation of genes, alright. So what all commonly observed mutations are? You will just have to mug these up. Intron 1 position, 619 base pair gene deletion, intron 1 position 1, frame shift mutations in codon 41 to 42 and codon 50. Alright. So clinically you classify thalassemia based on the severity of anemia or on the genetic defect or on the gene dosage. So it could be complete absence of beta chain or some synthesis of beta chain. So this can be classified as beta thalassemia major, in which there is complete absence, beta thalassemia minor. Beta chains are synthesized, but they are lesser in amount. Alright. Please remember that beta thalassemia major are always transfusion dependent. These patients are always transfusion dependent. Beta thalassemia minor patients are usually normal. They don't suffer from any hemolysis or as such. Anemia is there, but it gets detected incidentally. Alright. So coming to the clinical features. The clinical features are basically because of impaired beta chain synthesis. Impaired beta chain synthesis will lead to decrease in the adult hemoglobin, that is alpha 2 beta 2. Beta 2 will be less, so hemoglobin A will be reduced. That will result in anemia. Which anemia? Remember your Sita mnemonic, microcytic hypochromic anemia. Alright. Sita T stands for microcytic hypochromic anemia. Plus there will be an imbalance between the alpha and beta chains. Imbalance between the alpha and beta chain will affect the red cell survival. The red cell survival would be reduced. Alright. So beta chains are not there, so there will be alpha chains would be aggregated or they will form inclusions in the cells. This will in turn lead to ineffective erythropoiesis. Alright. So beta chain is not there, red cell survival would be reduced, there would be more of alpha chains. Alpha chain will form inclusions in the cell and this will lead to ineffective erythropoiesis, the most important cause of all the clinical features in beta thalassemia. So because of ineffective erythropoiesis, there is massive erythroid hyperplasia. Alright. Massive erythroid hyperplasia and extramedullary hematopoiesis. Massive erythroid hyperplasia and extramedullary hematopoiesis. So this erythroid hyperplasia will lead to crew cut appearance of the skull. Alright. Crew cut appearance of skull, also known as hair on end appearance. Yes, hair on end appearance. Crew cut appearance or hair on end appearance. It can also lead to the typical thalassemic faces, also known as chipmunk faces. All right, all important terms: thalassemic faces, chipmunk faces, crew-cut skull, and hair on end appearance. Characteristic of beta thalassemia. Plus, because of extramedullary hematopoiesis, you will get hepatosplenomegaly. All right. So this sums up all the clinical features of beta thalassemia. So you will see a characteristic blood picture in thalassemia. You will see microcytic hypochromic cells, plus you will see marked anisopoikilocytosis. Anisopoikilocytosis, marked variation in the shapes, marked variation in the size. All right. Plus you will see target cell, the characteristic target cells. Target cells, why? Because the hemoglobin has shifted into the center, as if there is a bullseye, a target. Okay. Plus you will see basophilic stippling, fragmented cells. Okay, the characteristic of thalassemia, characteristic blood picture. Please remember thal, target cells, Howell-Jolly bodies, anisocytosis, and low MCV or microcytic cells. All right. Characteristic thal in the thalassemic blood picture. Plus, what will happen to the reticulocyte count? Reticulocyte count will be raised. Of course, it will be raised, but not to that level which we expected. Why? Because of ineffective erythropoiesis. The erythropoiesis is not happening properly. So, the reticulocyte count will not be raised to that level. Okay. So, coming to the target cells, I told you characteristic target cells in thalassemia, where all you can see target cells. Target cells can be seen, please remember this, hot lips, HOT-LIPS, hot lips. You can see various hemoglobinopathies, obstructive jaundice, thalassemia, liver disease, particularly abscess, iron deficiency anemia, polycythemia, sideroblastic anemia. So, please remember hot lips, where all you can see target cells. Okay. Now, these patients also have iron overload. Why? As such, there is no iron deficiency. Microcytic hypochromic anemia, you know, iron deficiency anemia, there was iron deficiency, obvious. But patients with thalassemia, they do not have iron deficiency. So, no iron deficiency. So, why do these patients suffer from iron overload? First, now erythroid precursors, because of ineffective erythropoiesis, act on erythropoietin, okay, EPO. Now, this results in inhibition of hepcidin. Where did we study hepcidin? Hepcidin, or the central or the master regulator of iron hemostasis. Where is it secreted? Liver. Where does it act? Ferroportin. Yes. So, this hepcidin, what does it do? Increased levels of hepcidin, what do they do? They prevent absorption of iron. Here there is inhibition of hepcidin. So, there will be increased iron absorption and hence iron overload. Second factor responsible for iron overload is repeated blood transfusion. Alright, repeated transfusion also results in iron overload. So, this basically, these two factors results in secondary hemochromatosis. Hemochromatosis or iron overload. Now, this can lead to a cardiac disorders, and hence iron overload is an important cause of death in repeatedly and heavily transfused patients in beta thalassemia. Alright, now coming to the hemoglobin electrophoresis. We saw hemoglobin electrophoresis in thalassemia major. What will happen? HbF would be markedly raised, that is, it will be more than 90%. HbA would be reduced. Why? Because we don't have beta chain. So HbA would be reduced. HbF, alpha 2, gamma 2 will be raised. What will happen in thalassemia minor? Thalassemia minor, HbF would be raised. Yes, it will be around 1 to 2%. HbA would be reduced, and HbA2, the characteristic HbA2 would be reduced. It will be more than 3%. The normal was 2.5 to 3.5%. HbA2 in beta thalassemia minor would be more than 3%. Please remember, there is no other hemoglobinopathy in which HbA2 is raised. It is only beta thal minor where HbA2 is raised. So, characteristic of this disorder. Now, coming to the osmotic fragility test, we studied the same graph in the hereditary spherocytosis. This was the normal graph. This was hereditary spherocytosis where there was a shift to right. Why was a shift to right? Because the spherocytes were very fragile, very weak. Now, what happens in beta thalassemia? What happens to these cells? These cells are quite tough, quite hard, quite resistant. So, there is a shift to left. All right. Shift to left in thalassemia. So, shift to right in hereditary spherocytosis, shift to left in thalassemia. So, coming to Nesterov test. What do you mean by Nesterov? Naked eye, single tube, red cell, osmotic fragility test. Okay. Naked eye, single tube, red cell, osmotic fragility test. This is Nesterov test. What do you do here? You take a test tube with buffered saline, add few drops of blood in it, leave it for some time, and then after some time you put a white paper with a black line behind the tube, okay, behind the tube, and now try to see whether you can see that black line behind or not, okay. So, this is normal and this is thalassemic blood. How do you say that? In the normal blood, if you add buffered saline to normal blood, the cells will lyse. The cells will be settling down at the bottom and you will see clear plasma on the top. So, you can see the black line behind. So, you can see the black line behind it, normal blood. While what happens in thalassemic blood, the cells are tough, they will not lyse. So, you will not see this black line, okay, you will not see this black line behind, okay. If you see the line, it is normal. If the line is not seen, it is thalassemia. So, coming to the treatment. Treatment, we all know treatment for beta thalassemia is transfusion, prevention of iron overload by chelation, stem cell transplantation, but the most important is prenatal genetic diagnosis to prevent happening of thalassemia. Transfusion and chelation do help survival of patients till third decade, but the prognosis is very grim. Now, very important difference between iron deficiency anemia and thalassemia. Okay, both have microcytic hypochromic, both have less hemoglobin, low MCV, target cells, many overlapping features, but how will you differentiate? Yes, first we will calculate the Menser index. This is calculated by MCV upon RBC. Okay, MCV upon RBC is the Menser index. Okay, in iron deficiency anemia, it is more than 13. In thalassemia, it is less than 13. What will happen to reticulocyte count? Reticulocyte count would be markedly elevated in iron deficiency anemia, but normal or slightly elevated in thalassemia. Why? I told you earlier, it was because of ineffective erythropoiesis. Now, the characteristic differentiating factor is hemoglobin A2. Hemoglobin A2 would be normal and would be more than 3% in thalassemia. Please remember, I already told you No other hemoglobinopathy has raised hemoglobin A2 except for beta thalassemia. So this brings us to the end of thalassemias or the hereditary hemolytic anemias. So let's now start with the acquired hemolytic anemias. Okay, acquired hemolytic anemias. In the hereditary hemolytic anemias, we studied that the defect was with the red blood cell, whether within the cell because of enzymopathies or hemoglobinopathies, or because of the red cell membrane. But here in acquired hemolytic anemias, the defect is external or extracorpuscular, alright. But there's a catch here. The acquired hemolytic anemias are also with a red cell membrane abnormality, that is defect within the cell, the intracorpuscular, that is paroxysmal nocturnal hemoglobinuria. Only this is intracorpuscular, the rest of the defects are external or the extracorpuscular. So the defects could be antibody, that is immunohemolytic anemia, could be autoimmune hemolytic anemia, drug induced, or isoimmune. Alright. The other causes could be due to mechanical trauma, direct toxic effect on the red cell, acquired red cell membrane abnormality, I already told you, paroxysmal nocturnal hemoglobinuria, or splenomegaly. So coming to autoimmune hemolytic anemias, very quickly, two types, warm and cold. Starting with warm. Warm antibody or the autoantibody here is IgG type. It reacts with the red cell at 37 degree. Here the primary site of hemolysis is spleen. So this is an example of extravascular hemolysis. Okay, so the antibodies here primarily are idiopathic, but 25% of the cases they are also seen with lymphomas, leukemias, or drugs. What will you see in the peripheral blood smear? Spherocytes. I hope you all remember when we studied the hereditary spherocytosis, we saw a differential diagnosis for spherocytes as autoimmune hemolytic anemia. So you will see spherocytes. How will you differentiate it from hereditary spherocytosis? Direct Coombs test. So the direct Coombs test would be positive in autoimmune hemolytic anemia and negative in hereditary spherocytosis. So this was about warm antibody. Coming to cold antibody. Cold antibody is again of two types. One, it is primarily IgM. It reacts with the red cell at 4 degrees Celsius. Okay, usually seen with infections like cytomegalovirus, infectious mononucleosis, Epstein-Barr virus. Okay, this is IgM type. Second type we also called as paroxysmal cold hemoglobinuria, or also known as cold hemolysin disease. Why is it called paroxysmal cold hemolysin disease? Because as such it is a cold antibody. It reacts at 4 degrees Celsius, but it is not of IgM type. It is IgG type. That is why paroxysmal. Also this antibody is also known as Doneth-Landsteiner antibody. Okay, it's uncommon, usually seen in infections with Mycoplasma pneumoniae. Okay, so you can be asked as a question, which antibody or which autoimmune hemolytic anemia is associated with Mycoplasma infection? It is paroxysmal cold hemoglobinuria. Here also you will see spherocytes. Just like in the warm antibody, here also in the cold antibody you will see spherocytes, but they will be less marked. Okay. Now coming to the acquired red cell membrane abnormality. Alright. Please remember acquired red cell membrane abnormality. Acquired because it's an acquired hemolytic anemia. Red cell membrane abnormality, it's an intracorpuscular defect. This is present in adults. It usually presents as intravascular hemolysis. Alright. Please remember intravascular hemolysis. What is the defect in this? The red cell membrane defect. there is mutation in the X-linked gene which gene is mutated? PIGA, phosphatidyl inositol glycoside A. Alright, deficiency of the defect in this gene leads to deficiency of GPI anchor protein. Alright, GPI anchor protein. Now, normally the RBCs are protected against complement mediated activation and subsequent lysis by two GPI linked proteins. Two GPI linked proteins known as CD55 or DAF and MIRL or CD59. So, when there is a mutation in this gene, this leads to deficiency of CD55, DAF, MIRL, CD59, and hence the cells will be lysed by complement activation. Now, the screening tests. The screening test for PNHS, Ham's acidified serum test, sucrose hemolysis test, gel card test, and the confirmatory flow cytometry, which measures your CD55 and CD59, and flare test. Flare test basically measures your GPI protein. Now, if I ask you which confirmatory test is better, flow cytometry or flare, what will you answer? Flare. Why? Because here you directly measure the GPI protein. These proteins are released because of the GPI. So, flare test is more better. And the treatment here is a drug called eculizumab. Alright, treatment is eculizumab. So, before winding up all the acquired hemolytic anemias, we saw extravascular hemolysis. Extravascular hemolysis was seen in thalassemia, sickle cell anemia, and hereditary spherocytosis. Where all did you see intravascular hemolysis? Paroxysmal nocturnal hemoglobinuria, paroxysmal cold hemoglobinuria. And any disorder where you can see both EVH and IVH? G6PD, where you see both extravascular and intravascular hemolysis. Alright, so G6PD deficiency, you see both types of hemolysis. So, coming to aplastic anemia, very quickly, what happens in aplastic anemia? There is a shutdown of the bone marrow. No cells are produced. Alright, so what do you get? You get anemia, leukopenia, and thrombocytopenia. Alright, so no red blood cells, white blood cells, platelets, nothing is produced. So, aplastic anemia. Moreover, pluripotent stem cells are inhibited. This results in decrease in the production of all the 3 lineage cells. So, the causes, primary causes are Fanconi's anemia, which is congenital. Immune mediated is acquired. The secondary causes could be due to drugs, toxic chemicals, radiations, viral, paroxysmal nocturnal hemoglobinuria, an important cause for aplastic anemia, and idiopathic. Alright. Now, clinically, what will you see? You will see anemia. Anemia is usually normocytic, normochromic, plus reticulocytes. What will happen to reticulocytes? They will be not there. No reticulocytosis. Leukopenia. Patients are prone to infections. Thrombocytopenia. You will see hemorrhage, basically bleedings from gums, various other mucosas. Alright. Now coming to bone marrow. So what will you see in the bone marrow aspirate? Please remember, the bone marrow aspirate, you will not get anything. It will be a dry tap. Alright. Dry tap means you will get no tissues in bone marrow aspirate. If you see bone marrow biopsy, you will see acellular. Okay, it will be acellular. The biopsy would be acellular and the entire marrow will be replaced by fat tissue. So, this was aplastic anemia. Now, pancytopenia. Where all you can see pancytopenia? We just now discussed one condition, aplastic anemia. Now, aplastic anemia, the marrow cellularity was reduced, low. So, where else can you see pancytopenia with increased marrow cellularity? You can see in MDS, myelodysplastic syndrome, hypersplenism, megaloblastic anemia, paroxysmal nocturnal hemoglobinuria, and infiltration. Infiltration by what? Infiltration of bone marrow by various hematological malignancies, non-hematological malignancies, storage disorders, myelofibrosis or osteoporosis. All right. So with this, we come to this session, end of this session on anemias. What did we learn? We learned about the definition, basic investigations and the classification. First of all, we studied microcytic hypochromic anemia. Remember your Sita or Tick's mnemonic. Okay, we studied sideroblastic anemia, iron deficiency anemia, anemia of chronic disease. Thalassemia we studied in the hemolytic. Then was macrocytic or megaloblastic. Remember A, B, C, D, E, the causes of macrocytic anemia. Then we studied the hemolytic anemias, the hereditary because of the defects of the red blood cells, whether within the cells, enzymes or hemoglobin, or of the red cell membrane, and extracorpuscular defects or the acquired hemolytic anemias. Okay. So with this, we come to the end on the sessions of anemias. Please remember, I would again like to emphasize, anemia is a very simple topic. Try to understand the pathology of each and every anemia. Try to ask questions. What was the pathology? Uske baad kya hua? Uske baad kya hua? Try to go step by step. I'm sure you'll be able to solve each question of anemia. So please think like Rancho. Don't try to be Chatur. All right? And most important, study hard. All is well. All the best. Thank you.